You're listening to Rewriting the Rules, the podcast that dares to go deeper than training. I'm Bethany Bell, creator of the Canine Dialogue Dynamics method, and this is where behaviour meets relationship, science meets the soul, and obedience takes a backseat to understanding. Let's change the conversation. Welcome back to Rewriting the Rules. I'm Bethany Bell, and today we're going deeper. If you've ever wondered why your dog suddenly reacts or shuts down, or seems full of energy one moment and overwhelmed the next, you're not alone. These things don't come out of nowhere. There's always something happening beneath the surface. And in this episode, I want to show you a side of behaviour that often gets overlooked, which is the nervous system. And we're not talking about this in a dry academic way, but in a grounded, gentle and insightful way. The kind that just helps us really see our dogs. Because if we're going to understand behaviour honestly and compassionately, we need to start at the root. So settle in. We're not just talking about what dogs do. We're talking about why they do it. So let's begin with the basics. The nervous system is quite literally the body's internal messaging network. It's how your dog experiences the world through senses, movement, emotions, and regulation. And it's made up of two parts. We have the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, and we have the peripheral nervous system, the nerves that run through the rest of the body. But what really matters, especially in the context of behaviour, is how the nervous system regulates. It has one job really, and that's to keep our dogs safe, to interpret what's happening and decide, am I okay or am I not okay? And when things feel safe, your body stays in what we call a regulated state. And this is the same for dogs. This is a state where learning, exploring, and social interaction comes most naturally. But when something feels threatening, even subtly, the nervous system shifts. It moves into protection mode, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, sometimes faint, although that's more rare. But the key part is that these are not decisions that your dog is making. They're automatic physiological responses. They happen before logic, before thoughts, and before we even notice the trigger. So, when we think about behaviour, whether it's a dog barking at a stranger, hesitating at the door, or melting into your lap for comfort, we often stop at what we can see. But what if we looked underneath the surface? What if we understood that every moment of behaviour is rooted in something deeper? Something electric, alive, but often invisible. And that's where the nervous system comes in. The nervous system is our dog's internal translator. It processes every sound, scent, movement, and change in the environment. And it decides, before the dog even thinks, whether something feels safe or unsafe, whether to explore or to retreat, speak or stay silent. It's not about obedience or disobedience. It's about perception. It's about survival and feeling. And dogs, like us, don't feel in logic. They feel in waves, sensory waves, emotional waves, and neurological waves. So in today's episode, we're not just talking about science. We're talking about what it means to be alive and how dogs experience the world through their bodies, their breath, their heartbeat, long before any word is spoken. Because if we want to understand dogs, we have to start in what they're feeling and not just what they're doing. Because inside every dog, and every one of us, lives a beautifully designed system that is always working to protect us, regulate us, and respond to our world. This system is the autonomic nervous system, and it has two main branches, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, these names may sound technical, but the essence is simple. Think of it like this. The sympathetic nervous system is your dog's internal alarm bell. It gears the body up for action. It's what gets the heart racing when there's a noise at the door, what tightens the muscles when a stranger approaches, what surges adrenaline if a situation feels threatening. It's often summed up as fight or flight, though it's not just about panic. Sometimes it's excitement, anticipation, and readiness. And the parasympathetic nervous system, on the other hand, is the balancer. It brings things back down. It's the slow exhale after a long sigh, the softness in your dog's face when they curl up next to you, the feeling of safety that says, we're okay now. And this branch is often called rest and digest, and is just as important as the alertness of the sympathetic side. But the key of this is that none of this is bad. Neither one of them are bad. Neither one is wrong. They both exist for a reason. Problems arise when a dog gets stuck in one end of the spectrum where the nervous system doesn't feel safe enough to return to balance. And that's when we often see a dog labeled as reactive, anxious, or even stubborn. Their nervous system isn't malfunctioning. It's just trying to survive in the world around them. So what happens when the nervous system struggles to return to balance? Well, this is what we call dysregulation. So when a dog lives more often in survival states than in the grounded ones, not because they're broken, but because their body doesn't feel safe enough to let go. And here's the thing, dysregulation doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's loud, barking and lunging, hyperactivity, sudden fear responses, but other times it's quiet, shut down, disconnected, overly compliant, or simply flat. And because dogs cannot tell us in words that we typically understand, we have to look for their signs. We have to speak their language. We have to look at their breathing. Is it shallow or deep? Are their movements jittery or smooth? Do they look around nervously or scan constantly? Can they settle and rest, or are they always half alert? And dysregulation doesn't just come from trauma, though trauma certainly plays a role. It can also come from overwhelm, confusion, constant correction, or lack of autonomy. Even with well-meaning training, if it's too controlling or too performance-based, it can keep a dog in a perpetual state of heightened alert. But this is the truth that most people never talk about. A dog who has been taught what to do without ever being supported in how to feel may learn how to behave on the outside while still being unsettled within. And that's why behaviour alone doesn't tell the full story. So let me ask you, wherever you're listening from, just take a moment to think about this. Can you tell when your dog is truly resting and not just lying down? Have you ever praised calm behaviour without noticing whether it came from safety or shutdown? Do you sometimes find yourself managing your dog's actions without really exploring the state their nervous system is underneath? And what if instead of asking, how do I fix this behaviour, we started to ask, what is my dog's nervous system trying to tell me? Because that shift, that one change in how we look, is where the CDD method begins. Not with performance, not with command, but with listening. And sometimes the most powerful shift happens when we stop seeing behaviour as something to fix and start seeing it as something to understand. And I remember a dog that I worked with early on called Jasper. From the outside, Jasper was what many would just call reactive. He barked constantly at the sounds outside of the window, lunged at people who walked past the house, and just seemed to be in a state of constant tension. To those who didn't know him, he looked excitable, maybe even aggressive. But the more time I spent with him, the more I saw something else entirely. Jasper wasn't bad and he wasn't aggressive, he was just overwhelmed. His nervous system was operating in a state of constant hypervigilance. And imagine living in a house where every single sound just feels like a threat. The creak of a floorboard, a dog barking in the distance, footsteps walking past. He wasn't reacting for fun. He was reacting to survive. And the more I looked, the more I saw the signs. Rapid breathing, diluted pupils, tense posture, even when resting. There was no off switch. He wasn't able to downregulate. He wasn't being difficult. He was living in a body that just didn't feel safe. And instead of focusing on training the barking out of him, I focused on helping his nervous system feel supported. So we reduced all the stress in his life. We increased choices, created predictability and calm routines, and we gave him outlets for decompression. Not decompression that we imposed on him. We allowed him to tell us what he found decompressing and not what we assumed was decompressing. We also taught him language through the 5 phases of dialogue, and this helped because this helped to communicate to him what these things were that he was worried about. So all in all of these things together worked really well, because slowly his world started to get quieter and more peaceful, not because we silenced him, but because his body began to believe it didn't have to be on guard all the time. But this is what so many dogs are quietly going through. They're not being dramatic. They're trying to tell us something. And when we start looking through that lens, through the lens of the nervous system, we stop asking about fixing it and we start asking, what is it trying to tell us? But there's a lot of emotional layering involved with this. Have you ever felt like you were just doing okay and then one small thing just tipped you over the edge? You might have had a fairly normal day and then someone cut you off in traffic, or your plan gets disrupted, or someone speaks to you in a tone that feels dismissive, and suddenly you're crying, you're snapping, you're shutting down. But it wasn't really about that one thing. It was everything underneath it that was finally spinning over. And dogs have that too. Their nervous systems don't just reset after each event. Feelings do carry over and they build up. Imagine a dog who's slightly unsettled from a poor night's sleep, a bit hungry because their mealtime was late, mildly frustrated because they haven't had their walk yet, and then a surprise visitor arrives, and the visitor bends down to greet them without warning, and the dog growls. On the outside, it just looks like the dog's aggressive. The dog has a problem. The dog is badly behaved or unfriendly. And maybe to a conventional trainer, the answer would be to desensitize them to the stranger. But if we zoom out of all of that and we just see the emotional layering, we realize that the growl is the tip of an iceberg. It's the accumulation of emotional tension, a nervous system carrying more than it can hold with no space to release it. This is called cumulative load. And just like us, dogs don't only react to this moment, they carry the weight of the previous one. What if your dog is not overreacting? What if they're overwhelmed? What if your dog's struggle isn't disobedience, it's dysregulation? And this is why some days they can cope and other days they can't. It's not inconsistency, it's capacity. And it's our job not to train them harder, but to support them deeper. And one of the most common misunderstandings in the dog world, even in the force-free spaces, is how calmness is interpreted. We're often told a calm dog is a good dog. A calm dog is a content dog. We're told to aim for calm behaviour. We praise it and we reward it and we train for it. But what if what looks like calmness is actually shutdown? Shutdown is a biological freeze state, part of the nervous system's survival toolkit. It's a form of learnt helplessness that says, I can't escape, I can't fight, so I'll just go still. It might even look like a dog who tolerates everything without complaint, who doesn't react even in stressful situations. They submit easily when being handled or manipulated. They're easily compliant, often seen as an obedient dog. They seem so good at the groomers or the vets, even when fearful things were happening. And to the untrained eye, that looks ideal. But to a dog, it can feel like despair. And there's a huge risk involved when we mistake shutdown for calmness. We often miss the quiet cry for help, the lip licks, the yawns, the tension in the shoulders, the slightly tucked tail, the eyes that looked away. These dogs are praised for being easy, bulletproof. But they've just stopped speaking because they've learnt that nobody's listening. And with the CDD approach, we don't seek calm for our benefit. We seek regulation for the dog's benefit. There's a difference between a dog who is truly regulated and at ease and one who has learned it's safer to stay small, silent, and still. In the CDD method, we don't want to shut dogs down. We want to help them come back online, to feel and to choose, to feel safe enough to speak. And when we think about the nervous system, we often imagine a biological function, something medical or mechanical. But in reality, the nervous system is an emotional storyteller. It reveals the truth behind the behavior, and it speaks the unspeakable. It tells us what the dog feels and not just what the dog does. Because behavior is just the surface and emotion is the depth. Let's take, for example, two dogs both refuse to walk past a gate. One is barking, lunging and growling, and the other stops, freezes and won't move. The behavior looks different, but the emotion underneath it might be similar. It could be fear, uncertainty, confusion. The nervous system shows us why they're doing what they're doing and not just what they're doing. But this matters because when we reduce everything to obedience or outcomes, we lose the emotional nuance that helps us to understand and connect with dogs. And that's why the CDD method always asks, what's the emotional story here? What's this behavior telling us about how the dog feels? What state of the nervous system regulation is the dog experiencing? Because a regulated dog can learn, trust, and connect, but a dysregulated one cannot. And if we focus only on behavior, we'll miss the emotional root. Behavior is a loop, not a straight line, because the nervous system is dynamic. It moves between states constantly. A dog who seems regulated in one moment might become overwhelmed in the next, and not because they're being difficult or because they're choosing to do it, but because they're emotionally tired, overstimulated, or caught in a feedback loop. Understanding this helps us respond instead of react. And we often think of dog behavior as something to be fixed or modified or changed. But what if behavior is actually a mirror? What if the way we feel shapes how they feel? And how we behave and present ourselves can shape how they feel? Co-regulation is a two-way nervous system dialogue. It's the process by which two beings regulate each other's emotional state. It can be done through gentle words, but without commands, through presence and energy, body language and tone. Dogs are deeply sensitive to the human nervous system. They read our breath and muscle tension, posture and facial expressions, movement patterns, voice rhythm and tone. This means that we're not just observers of our dog's emotional state, we're participants in it. And your body is always communicating, even when your mouth is not. When you're anxious, rushed or frustrated, your dog doesn't just hear your words, they feel your state and they adapt accordingly. Some dogs become clingy or hypervigilant, some dogs shut down and freeze, and some erupt in seemingly out of the blue reactivity. But it's not just out the blue, it's relational because it's co-regulation. And that doesn't mean we need to be perfectly calm all the time. That's impossible and it's inauthentic. And it's not about just stopping ourselves from being anxious because that's also not possible. It's not about blaming anxiety on this. It's just about being aware about what's happening. It means we need to be emotionally aware. When we become aware of our own nervous system and take steps to settle it, we offer our dogs a safer, more stable emotional anchor. And in turn, we help ourselves as well as our dogs. So as we bring today's episode to a close, I want to leave you with this. Your dog's nervous system is not just a barrier to training. It's not something to overcome, suppress, or ignore. It's the gateway to their entire experience in the world and to your relationship with them. When we slow down and we start to read the language of the body, when we respond not just to what they do, but to what they feel, everything changes. The way we walk through the world, the way they learn, the way they trust, and the way you understand each other. This is the heart of the CDD method, not just rewriting behaviour, but rewriting relationship through dialogue, empathy, and attunement. In our next episode, we'll be stepping into something a little more philosophical. We're going to be asking, why do we feel the need to train a dog to like something in the first place? What if we let go of the urge to make everything a performance? And what if trust doesn't come from shaping responses, but from honouring choices? I hope you'll join me next time. Until then, take a moment to breathe, observe, and notice the stories your dog's body is already telling you. They're speaking, and you're just learning to listen. See you next Thursday.